Deep in the unforgiving wasteland of the ancient Near East, a storm was brewing. The sky turned the color of bruised iron, and the wind began to howl with a ferocity that drove nomadic herdsmen to their knees. According to the ancient scribes who penned the Book of Job, this was not just a weather event. It was the voice of the divine, speaking out of a violent whirlwind, demanding answers from a broken man. But the voice did not speak of morality, nor did it offer comfort. Instead, it spoke of monsters. It conjured images of two unimaginable, nightmarish titans that defied all human comprehension, beasts of such cataclysmic power that humanity could do nothing but tremble before them. They were called Behemoth and Leviathan. For thousands of years, these names have echoed through the corridors of history, whispered in ancient synagogues, debated in medieval monasteries, and analyzed in modern paleontological labs. They have been dismissed as mere poetic allegories, symbolic representations of human pride or conquering empires. But what if they were something else entirely? What if the ancient texts were not speaking in metaphors, but attempting to describe a terrifying flesh and blood reality that has long since been buried by the sands of time? The truth about Leviathan and Behemoth is a dark and labyrinthine journey that takes us from the blood-soaked altars of the Canaanites to the dusty excavations of modern archaeology, revealing a story far more horrifying than simple myth. To understand the terror of these beasts, we must first transport ourselves to the mindset of the ancient world. Imagine living in a time when the edges of the map were shrouded in absolute darkness. The oceans were a churning abyss of black water, capable of swallowing entire fleets without a trace. The vast, uncharted deserts were home to predators that could drag a man into the shadows in the blink of an eye. In this fragile existence, humanity was not the apex predator. We were prey. The ancient Israelites, a small and vulnerable nation nestled between the crushing imperial war machines of Egypt and Babylon, knew this fear intimately. When the Book of Job was written, likely between the 7th and 4th centuries BCE, the writers were grappling with the fundamental question of human suffering. Why do bad things happen to good people? The answer provided by the divine whirlwind is chilling in its indifference. The universe, the voice declares, is not a safe, human-centric utopia. It is a wild, untamed, and deeply dangerous place populated by primordial horrors that God alone can control. The first of these horrors is Behemoth, introduced in Job chapter 40 as the undisputed master of the land. The text commands the reader to look upon this creature, describing a beast of colossal, earth-shattering mass. It eats grass like an ox, but its strength lies in its loins and the power in the muscles of its belly. Its bones are tubes of bronze, its limbs like bars of iron. But it is the next line that has caused centuries of bitter, fiercely contested debate among theologians and scientists alike. He moves his tail like a cedar. For generations, biblical scholars, desperate to ground the scriptures in the natural world, attempted to identify Behemoth as a hippopotamus or an elephant. It made logical sense. These were the largest land animals known to the ancient Near East. But there is a glaring, unavoidable problem with this theory. A hippopotamus has a tiny comical flap of a tail. An elephant's tail is little more than a thin, wiry rope. Neither of these appendages even remotely resembles a towering cedar tree, the massive, majestic evergreens that dominated the mountains of ancient Lebanon. This anatomical impossibility gave rise to a stunning, controversial theory in the 19th and 20th centuries. As the fledgling science of paleontology began unearthing the fossilized remains of giant, long-necked dinosaurs, a fringe group of scholars made a radical leap. Could Behemoth have been a sauropod? Could a creature like a brachiosaurus or a diplodocus with a massive tree-like tail have somehow survived into human history? The idea sent shockwaves through both religious and scientific communities. Young Earth creationists championed the theory, using it as proof that humans and dinosaurs coexisted. Mainstream science, armed with radiometric dating proving dinosaurs died out 65 million years before humans evolved, vehemently pushed back. But the controversy forced linguists to look closer at the original Hebrew text. The word used for tail is zanov. Some bold modern philologists have suggested that in the context of ancient Near Eastern euphemisms, zanov might not mean a literal tail at all, but rather the creature's reproductive organs, emphasizing its overwhelming, uncontrollable virility and raw, primal power. Suddenly, the image of Behemoth shifts from a grazing dinosaur to a towering, unstoppable force of brutal, earthy nature, an animal so massive and unyielding that the Jordan River crashes against its mouth and it does not flinch. Yet as terrifying as the master of the land was, it paled in comparison to the nightmare that ruled the deep. In Job chapter 41, the focus shifts to the ocean, and the text introduces Leviathan. The description is nothing short of apocalyptic. This is not a mere whale or a large crocodile. The text describes a demonic serpent of the sea with rows of impenetrable, interlocking scales that are sealed so tightly no air can pass between them. Its chest is as hard as a millstone. When it rises, the mighty are terrified. Swords, spears, and javelins bounce off its armored hide like brittle straw. But the most horrifying detail is its breath. The scripture states that Leviathan sneezes flashes of light. Its eyes glow like the dawn, and flaming torches erupt from its mouth. It literally breathes fire, making the deep ocean boil like a cauldron. For centuries, this description was the stuff of nightmares, heavily inspiring the terrifying sea monsters drawn on the edges of medieval maps, warning sailors, "Here there be monsters." But where did the Hebrew scribes get the inspiration for a fire-breathing, impenetrable sea dragon? The answer lay buried for 3,000 years, hidden beneath the dirt of a Syrian farmer's field. In the spring of 1928, a Syrian peasant was ploughing his land near the Mediterranean coast when his plough struck something hard. It wasn't a rock, it was the roof of an ancient tomb. This accidental discovery led French archaeologists to unearth the lost, ancient city of Ugarit, a thriving Canaanite metropolis that had been destroyed during the late Bronze Age collapse. Deep within the ruins, archaeologists discovered an expansive library of clay tablets covered in cuneiform script. When linguists finally cracked the dead language, a cold realization washed over the historical community. The tablets detailed a violent, bloody mythology that predated the biblical texts by centuries. At the center of these myths was a storm god named Baal, who engaged in a cosmic battle to the death with a terrifying multi-headed sea dragon. The name of the Canaanite dragon was Lotan. The linguistic connection was undeniable. Lotan and Leviathan are the exact same word, sharing the identical Semitic root. The realization was a staggering twist for biblical historians. Leviathan was not an original creation of the Hebrew god. It was a dark, ancient cultural memory, an adaptation of a much older Canaanite myth. The ancient Near East was obsessed with a motif that historians call Chaoskampf, the struggle against chaos. In these ancient cultures, the sea was the ultimate representation of uncontrollable, primordial chaos. It was dark, unpredictable, and entirely hostile to human life. To the ancients, the idea that a massive, multi-headed serpent lurked in the black depths wasn't just a scary story. It was a fundamental truth of the universe. When the Hebrew scribes wrote of Leviathan, they were co-opting the terrifying monster of their enemies to make a profound theological statement. They were saying that this ultimate, fiery dragon of chaos, which the Canaanites believed was a rival god, was merely a pet to the creator of the universe. But as history moved forward, the myth of these beasts grew darker and far more conspiratorial. We must turn our attention to the Apocrypha, the forbidden. Discarded books of the Bible that the early church fathers desperately tried to erase from history. Deep within texts like the Book of Enoch and the Apocalypse of Baruch, a strange and deeply unsettling prophecy emerges. These ancient, mystical texts claim that Behemoth and Leviathan were originally created on the fifth day of creation as a pair, male and female. But God quickly realized that if these two monsters were allowed to mate, their offspring would devour the entire world. To prevent the destruction of the earth, God separated them. He placed Behemoth, the male, in the invisible desert of Dendane, east of the Garden of Eden. He cast Leviathan, the female, into the deepest, darkest abyss of the ocean. There they wait in a state of suspended animation. But they are not meant to sleep forever. The apocryphal texts reveal a terrifying eschatological secret. At the end of time, when the world is plunged into its final, apocalyptic judgment, Behemoth and Leviathan will be unleashed. They will engage in a final, earth-shattering combat, tearing the world apart with their fury. And then, in a twist that borders on cosmic horror, they will be slaughtered by God and served as a grand, cannibalistic feast for the righteous survivors of the apocalypse. Why did the early church suppress these texts? Why was the idea of eating the flesh of primordial monsters hidden away? Theologians believe the imagery was too savage, too pagan, and too dangerous. It echoed the blood-soaked rituals of Babylon and Sumeria, threatening to drag the monotheistic religion back into the dark, chaotic polytheism it had fought so hard to escape. Yet, just when science and history thought they had neatly categorized Leviathan and Behemoth as psychological archetypes and ancient mythological plagiarism, the Earth offered up one more shocking revelation. In November 2008, a team of paleontologists was digging in the brutal wind-scoured Pisco Formation in the Atacama Desert of Peru. This arid wasteland, one of the driest places on Earth, was ironically once the floor of a shallow prehistoric sea. As the scientists brushed away the millions of years of sand, they uncovered a skull. But this was no ordinary skull. It was nearly 10 feet long, armed with teeth that were over a foot in length, the largest teeth of any known animal in Earth's history. It was the skull of a prehistoric, hyper-carnivorous sperm whale that swam the oceans 12 million years ago. It was an apex predator designed to hunt and tear apart other large whales. When the scientific community realized the sheer, horrifying magnitude of the beast, there was only one name fitting enough to give it. In 2010, they officially named the monster Livyatan melvillei, honoring both the biblical demon of the deep and the author of Moby Dick. The discovery of Livyatan forced a chilling question back into the cultural consciousness. Did the ancient writers of the Near East stumble upon fossilized remains like these? The deserts of the Middle East, much like the Atacama, are rich in marine fossils. It is entirely possible that nomadic wanderers, thousands of years ago, stumbled across the massive petrified skulls of long-dead marine reptiles like mosasaurs, or the colossal femur bones of dinosaurs protruding from the canyon walls. Without the science of geology to explain deep time, how could they possibly comprehend what they were looking at? The only logical conclusion for an ancient mind staring into the foot-long fossilized teeth of a prehistoric monster would be to construct a mythology of terror. They were holding the very bones of Behemoth and Leviathan. But what about the fire, the glowing eyes, and the boiling sea? Modern marine biology offers a haunting explanation for this seemingly magical trait. The deep ocean, the very domain where Leviathan was said to dwell, is completely devoid of sunlight. But it is not entirely dark. The deep sea is alive with bioluminescence. When a massive creature disturbs the water column, it triggers billions of microscopic dinoflagellates to flash with brilliant blue-green light. A massive predator breaching the surface of a dark, bioluminescent sea would quite literally appear to be trailing glowing sparks and breathing a mist of cold fire. The ancient sailors, witnessing a massive whale breaching through a glowing, phosphorescent sea at midnight, would have seen a dragon of light and flame. The myth wasn't a fabrication. It was an exaggerated, terrified observation of a natural world they did not understand. The story of Leviathan and Behemoth is not just a tale of ancient theology or paleontology. It is a psychological mirror reflecting humanity's deepest, most primal fears. We are a species that likes to believe we are in control. We build massive concrete cities, we dam the raging rivers, we map the ocean floors, and we split the atom. We have convinced ourselves that we have conquered the wild earth. But the Book of Job, the forgotten Canaanite myths, and the fossilized jaws of apex predators buried in the desert tell a different story. They remind us that our time on this planet is brief, and our control is an illusion. Behemoth and Leviathan represent the unstoppable, indifferent forces of nature that do not care about human empires, economies, or philosophies. They are the earthquake that levels a city in seconds. They are the tsunami that washes away a coastline without warning. They are the chaotic, untamable energy of a universe that is far older, darker, and more violent than we want to admit. We may have relegated these monsters to the pages of ancient religious texts and the dusty shelves of mythology. We may laugh at the primitive fears of our ancestors who believed a fire-breathing serpent circled the earth. But the next time you stand on the edge of the ocean at night, looking out into the pitch-black, churning abyss, or when you feel the deep, low rumble of thunder shaking the earth beneath your feet, remember the voice from the whirlwind. The monsters of chaos may have different names today, but the terrifying truth remains. We do not own this world, and down in the crushing, lightless depths, the ancient, untamed power of the Leviathan still waits.